Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in thriving and surviving, perhaps in that reverse order, as a Pilates instructor. I have 4 things today, and more in terms of what I haven't usually done is list the 4 things and then go back and revisit them and then hit them again on the way out, which would be what? Which would be the merry-go-round, actually carousel, of spaced repetition to anything in order to have the frequency develop the familiarity. All right, so the 4 things today are a question: why up on metatarsals before flat foot? That's the title. Number 2 is, how can you feel where your arms belong? So a question and a question. 3 is, almost everyone uses language. Right? I was going to say everyone, but almost everyone uses language. And number 4 is, out of 4, seeing the exercises versus understanding how they're put together. I'm used to that quick thing before going into it in detail. But we'll see. You know, be open to new things and new ways of presentation. So it wasn't really until I started working out today that something went by I thought very specific, but very illustrative of Pilates, insofar as it being consistent and yet having apparent inconsistencies that are better understood through why the inconsistency exists. So, on number 1, why up on the metatarsals before flat foot is the question. And this refers to a series of exercises on the reformer called the long stretches, where you do the long stretch, body, 5 points on a line. The down stretch, a big extension, right? 5 points on a smooth curve. And then up stretch, to me a pinnacle of effort that we could spend a lot of time talking about, but I'm going on, the up stretch, to the elephant. And we could be talking about why those exercises are in that order. But after the elephant comes arabesque, which means one leg up, and to me that's what it means. And in arabesque, you start out up on the balls of your feet, your metatarsals, heels against the shoulder rests, so your ankle is at an obtuse angle. And then after that comes flat foot. And if we work from the center out, and so much is so consistent with that you work from the center out, why do we do a pointed foot arabesque before a flat-footed one? And for me, there's 2 reasons for that. And the one reason that's right up front is because that's the way Joe did it on film. Okay? And then whatever other reason you have, or rationale, or intuition, or superstition about why that is the way it is, even to the point of thinking that it doesn't matter, my point of view is that it has to do with how the body evolves into the ability that you want to ask of it in this particular instance, in that people are really tight in their hamstrings and their gastrocnemius and Achilles tendon. And so to go to flat foot is more difficult in the engagement of it as you emerge into your ability to do it, right? I'm not saying about later when you can do either, but I think it comes in that order because it's easier to be in an open, soft point, in a demi point, front snap kick, an end point at the metatarsals in either case. And then to go into more of an acute angle or more of a bend and just push through the heel is is more of a connection, just like it was and still is in the long stretch. So this coming from the center and moving out seems contradicted in a pointed foot before flexed foot, but it's in the nature of the beast to get a handle on it as a pointed foot and let that evolve into a flat foot from plantar flexion to dorsiflexion. You plant your foot or you do the opposite. Number 2. So again, on the side splits on the reformer, your arms are out. And it's one thing to have your arms out, and it's one thing to have them on and trying to be as straight as you can with them. Okay. It's another thing, well, maybe they're the same thing. But when I feel it one way, when I'm not paying attention to, when I'm not sure what to call it. So what is core new tension? 4 words. 4 words. Be familiar with that to get to an explanation of this, right? So right there you go from some concept to the ability to do something that, if not right away, quicker than anything else, will produce a sensation of core new tension. And from that, what do you get? A sensation of alignment. But, okay, so. What do you call it when, so my shoulder goes this way, and then between my shoulder and my elbow, it goes the opposite way. So there's a twist going one way and a twist going the other way. And then when it goes out, it switches again. Because shoulder back, elbow up, and that's oppositional rotation along one axis. And then at the elbow, the reverse happens. With the ability to reach through the wrist into opposition of that, so that the way you engage your arms is primarily engaging your shoulders where they belong. And off of that, knowing that oppositional rotation along one axis defines where your arm belongs in space. Okay? Why is that? Because now, when you get asked the question, if you can make it sensational as an answer, It transcends an intellectual response that has something to do about sensation being a priori to thinking. But let's move on. It's the first time I've given a definition to something that I don't know the name of. Because core tension is oppositional rotation between two axes, but when it comes to where your arm belongs, shoulder rotates one way, out to the elbow rotating in opposition of that, to create tension off of that, and then reversing again out to wrist. So it's one thing to be straight or completely turned out. It's another thing to have oppositional rotation along one axis. So you have these two spirals going out your limbs, of course, because the same physics applies to your legs as to your arms. Who knew? Number three. So I was going to say everyone uses language, and then it seems more accurate to say almost everyone uses language. And my point about that is everyone uses language, but how well you use it depends on how well you understand it. Right? Am I wrong in that? And so MMP, as a point of view, looks at the original mat work and says, there's structure in there. There's grammar in there. And from that grammar, you can extrude language. And in so doing, resonate with the grammar that it comes from. See? So how well you understand the grammar. No, I'll see. Okay. How well you understand the grammar influences how well you speak the language. And if you're a Pilates instructor giving instructions and that's your language, and you and I and human culture uses language as it wishes, right? It's fascinating. So there's no organizing everybody to speak the language the same way to a point where it's completely disconnected from the grammar that spawned the language, or the grammar that is, well, the grammar that the language is structured in, right? MMP point of view. So number 4, and this has been fascinating recently because I had a student ask for DVD material that's been out there for a long time, and it's in the striking difference between it and what I'm doing now is that it is the content, the exercises. You see the movements, and they're arranged within the context of the ideal that presents itself in the original work. And so you have to even be willing to entertain that notion, and to many, understandably, it's not an attractive notion to no longer have free reign of mystery and unknowability, and to at least having a handle, a rational reasoned argument based on the original material. So an ideal point of view, rather than an inherited one, a traditional one, a lineage one, all of that will always be in place, will always be part of that fabric. But the ideal, I think, that shines from within will be the bedrock of what everyone stands on, because not to is to miss the point, right? And you may spend your whole life missing the point and enjoying it and having your tribe enjoy it, and good for all. But on a large time frame, big concept kind of thing, we're back to the needle. This needle, like a compass needle, that eventually settles on north, right? I think Pilates is the word, and all of its 10,000 views are energies and little magnets that in some way influence the needle, but that the needle itself will end up pointing at the essence of what makes it what it is. So that's a personal opinion on a long scale about how Pilates is moving towards a deeper and better understanding of itself, which you can only hope for given the tsunami of Pilates passion sweeping the globe. So seeing the exercises, capturing them on film, and being digital enough to evaluate them and keep reaching for, a better expression of what you're after, close to the ideal as you can get, really. And all of that based on original work or an inclusion of the ideal that the original work points to. So it may be totally inappropriate, all this stuff that is ideal, but if you just take the real of Joe's sequence and Joe's words, and then you overlay a point of view of an ideal to it, if it enriches in any way your understanding of the classical work, that brings you closer to the human being and their method. And we're all human beings. So in that regard, I close with, know your target. Know your target. Because at least when you know your target, you know what you're about. As an instructor, you know that you're aiming for something. And in the case of MMP, regardless of the human being, regardless of the condition of the human being, or their capacities, or their abilities to use those capacities, maybe that's saying the same thing, regardless of that, the Pilates instructor always knows their target, and they are after an experience, a precious, treasured, the kind of experience that the more you can be in it or have it, the more likely you are to survive. Why is that important? It's because the originator was a survivor. Anyone I ever met that knew him and dealt with him and learned from him would get around to, if not right up front, and usually it was interesting, the ones that waited to say, Joseph was a survivor, that kind of way. And I always felt out of my depth in understanding or appreciating what was being said to me. I was a boomer baby, and survival was never an issue in my life like it was for Joe's during Joe's time. And even if it wasn't those times, Joe's passion of the choreography of the mat was documented by him 40 years apart, unchanged. And I think that's important to know. So that all the people that say, well, I'm sure Joe work evolved as he went through his career, and I'm just continuing on the evolution of things, right? That's a financial and egotistical assumption. It isn't necessarily the way MMP takes a look at it. Because if there is essence, meaning, and within the essence is ideal, which is one of the reasons why there's the tsunami wave, because it's an acknowledgement of the truth that's in there. And it's not that that truth is evolving up to me or up to you or up to anybody, as much as what's there is already there. And I think that's an important, understanding of the two parts of a point of view. There's the original work of Joe, and then there's what we all make of it. And MMP makes an ideal out of it, based on just Joe's book. See, that's the only source of legitimacy of this point of view, because it doesn't rely on the passage of tradition for the point of view. And that's as well as I've ever said that. Rewind and write it down and polish it as a phrase of explanation. Know your target. Know your target. Because life can't live forever. And I completely agree with an instructor friend of mine's statement that Pilates works and Pilates takes time. All of that's true. But see, again, I get lost in the point I was going to make. Oh, because I started with life doesn't live forever. What you want as an instructor are results. And you don't want them to come lazily down a slow-moving river as much as on a wave that's throwing enough that you feel like you're riding it. Meaning the better you are as an instructor, the faster people get what you're talking. Now, I was going to say the faster people get what you're talking about. But instructing isn't talking. Remember that difference? And you don't want them to get anything as much as have the experience. And it's only when they sign up for workshops and they want to come understand what's going on that you get into the explanation of what's going on. Right? Because if you start trying to run a workshop in a private session, if you start explaining stuff, you diminish the amount of time that you have to act as an instructor and your student to pursue the movement. That's why I rarely demonstrate. I would love to demonstrate every exercise to my student. And then I would get half of the workout and they would get half of the workout. And I would have built up in their mind a view of what it's supposed to look like because they're watching my body do it, not having or generating an internal sense of what it's like for their body to do it. And see, part of that autonomy that you give a student is a way to embrace their imagination in their effort that produces a sensation that they can determine, a difference in, a distinction in, that they can make a distinction in. It may be the smallest brand of Pilates or have the fewest students. But at the peak of the mountain, there aren't many people that have an interest, a willingness, or an ability to get there. So because life can't live forever, you're not in a rush. Your whole thing is just about being in the moment, right? But the whole thing is about the depth of your understanding and experience all of that mystery that you are as a person and then as an instructor, seeking to have the most efficient interaction possible in the midst of unnoticed, in the midst of all the fun. Even if the fun is only satirical and sarcastic, meaning you're in so much pain that there is no fun to be seen in this, but just in the pursuit of something ideal that has a sensational connection to it, that is discernible by sensation, is at least something beyond or other than the pain that is present. See behind the curtain. See behind the curtain. I think behind the curtain is each person has a curtain and groups have curtains. But there's this impulse coming behind it, you know, life and projection, synthesis, being a human being. And I don't think I considered human nature as much as a way of framing framing maybe, a point of view. But it really helps when looking at Pilates to consider human nature, because that's what it's all about. And within that human nature, within MMP, there's capacities of being, thinking, and observing. And your artistry is in taking your student towards that experience while pursuing the choreography. Ideally, that you're in that state of being through the whole choreography. If you've ever been a member of a class or an instructor of a class that just took off into a flow that never got interrupted, those are blessings indeed. It's almost like you get to dive really deep and stay really deep for a really long time, and then everyone comes out of it together. Why is that? Why is a group experience different than an individual experience? And what is it in the group experience? It's all these people diving in to get depth on the same exercise at the same time, in the same tempo, in the same rhythm. It's choreographed. It's a thrill to do that, participate in that in any way. And before I let go of that thought, the the observing capacity that's being exercised in a group. You have to get into my field theory of observing as a field to embrace that kind of connection between the participants all doing the same thing, and in this case doing the Pilates mat work, the choreography of the mat. All that intensity of focus, all that familiarity of what they're doing, because you couldn't flow that way without being familiar enough with it, unless you're at least smart enough not to try to interrupt the flow, even if you're not participating in it. So all of that's curtain. See behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2. Add 2 and 2. Right? Ask for the world. You really ask for a lot of money when you instruct. And I would say be a presenter. Again, that's the latest thing I've tried to lead on. Udemy.com, UDEMY.com. For $15 are high definition videos of me presenting the 5 things fundamental to being a presenter, an MMP presenter. Why not have a means to introduce people to what takes you from conventional and contemporary in some way to something that's at a different level or in a different place, from a different point of view? Add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking.